From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Overtime Podcast.
From the Fox 8 studios in New Orleans, is the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. I'm Vasilios. That is Sean Fazan. Remember to like, subscribe, rate, and review. You can find us wherever you listen to and watch your podcast. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit the little bell notification button. You get updated whenever we upload a new podcast. Sean Fazan, it's game week for your New Orleans Saints. And you were in the locker room today, first day of practice. What was the energy like in there?
Really, it's a loose locker room. They feel good. They feel confident. You can feel it in the locker room. I've seen some tense locker rooms, especially the first week of the season because there's so many unknowns. I've seen teams that are probably a little overconfident. Hint, hint. We'll get to a team that was a little overconfident a little later in the show. Doesn't have to do with the Saints, but it has to do with another local team that we cover here. So this matches everything I've felt about this team throughout the offseason, camp, preseason, now into game week, which leads me to this sort of theme of the Saints portion of this podcast. You know, this is what I do. This is what I do. And it is frankly this: surviving September. Surviving September has always been, it's probably an underrated portion of the entire NFL ideology, NFL landscape, but it's even more crucial towards the Saints. What do I mean by surviving September? Surviving September is simply this: no team knows who they are in September. There's always a fact-finding mission. There's always an identity-forming process that doesn't come together till sometime in mid-October into November. But the games still count in September.
Yep.
So you have to survive September. You have to go through this process where you know you're not exactly who you're going to be. There's going to be some tinkering. There's going to be some injuries. There's going to be a lot of things that happen before you are fully confident in who you are. But while you're going through that, you have to figure out a way to win. You have to figure out a way to survive those things that are kind of working against you a little bit. But they're working against every team, and you have to figure out a way to win. It doesn't matter if it's 3-2. Doesn't matter if it's 41-38. Doesn't matter if it's 27-26. You do whatever you have to do to survive September. That is probably universally true around the NFL, but it's probably more so the case with the New Orleans Saints post-2006. Surviving September, success in September has always been key with the Saints. For whatever reason, since 2006, an early season hole has been insurmountable for this team to overcome. And I'm not even talking about like a crazy early season hole. I'm talking about like 1-3. They just have never been able to overcome a sloppy start in September. Losses in September. Now, on the flip side, success in September it doesn't mean they haven't peaked in September. So success in September, when they've had it, has generally carried over into the entirety of the season, where it paces out into the entirety of the season, to where you start well in September, you're probably making the playoffs in January. Go back to the last, all the playoff teams since 2006. 2006, they were 3-1. Now, some of these weren't exactly in September, but I generally go by the first 4 games of the season, so I'm calling it September. 09, 4-0. 10, I think they were 3-1. 11, they were 3-1. 13, they were 3-1. 17 was the only season where they lost their first 2 games of the season and still made the playoffs. 18, they were 3-1. 19, 3-1. 20, they started off 1-0 and ended up 2-2 to start the first quarter of the season. So their success in September, they were able to keep that pace going. But on the flip side, as I mentioned, if they fall in a hole, 1-3 or below, they've never been able to overcome it. And, you know, we've seen teams start like 1-6 and then go on some crazy rally and end up, you know, like 9-8 or whatever it is, win like 8 of their last 11 games. The Saints have just never been able to do that after a slow start in September. It's something about the energy of trying to build their way back. I remember back in 2007, 2008 was the same way. 14, 15, 16 all follow the same format. Last year, they ended up 1-3. They were, you know, a bounce away in London from starting 2-2.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm here to tell you, surviving September is very, very, very real when it comes to the New Orleans Saints. And when you look, when that calendar goes past week 4 into week 5, and they are not at least 2-2, that has never been a good thing for the Saints. But on the flip side, if they are at least 2-2, they've got a very, very, very realistic chance of going forward. All that to say this, they're ready for week 1. This is the start of September. They feel good about where they are. I think they have less unknowns this season, or how do I phrase this? There are unknowns. We have a new quarterback, some new players to key positions, but I think they feel better about those unknowns than they have been in years past, where I think there would be, if those unknowns didn't turn out to be the player they thought they would be, then I think that would be more surprising than in years past, if that makes any sense. So
Absolutely.
I think September it's weird because, you know, I remember going, you know, you build up to the regular season, and I remember watching week 1 games, and then later in the season, you'll start just kind of reviewing stuff, and you go back and look, wow, they were doing this in week 1? They threw it to who in week 1? I can recall, was it 18 or 19? It was the one game Cam Meredith of all people had a touchdown catch from Drew Brees. It was just one of those things. Things change so much throughout the season and evolve so much throughout the season that you're just a different team later in the year than the beginning of the year, but the beginning of the year matters so much, especially to the Saints. You got to figure out a way to overcome. So all those things are on the table as they get ready to go forward against Tennessee. Probably their most difficult opponent of the 3 September matchups this year. Talk about Tennessee with Derrick Henry and a steady quarterback in Tannehill, Bryce Young, the rookie in the Panthers, and obviously Jordan Love, who's basically a rookie for the Green Bay Packers. So surviving September is of crucial importance to the New Orleans Saints, and I don't know. I've been getting a good vibe from this team. They have a good vibe. They have not been shy about expressing their confidence, and yet there is a little bit of nerves because you still don't really know until the game starts. So finally, we get to answer some questions Sunday against Tennessee inside the Superdome.
Do they get the win? We'll talk about it more as we get closer to the game. But
I'm going to get into the matchup on Wednesday,
Okay.
like a little more intricacies of, you know, back and forth matchup wise. But
it's Monday. It's the first practice of the season. Like,
yeah, I don't know if I can go there yet. I feel good about where they stand though.
I do know what we can talk about in the meantime.
Okay.
And for everybody that's watching this right now, if you had your eyes glued to college football last night at Camping World Stadium, boy, was that a shellacking of college football proportions. It was not pretty, Sean, watching LSU get...
Watching my beloved LSU Tigers get thoroughly embarrassed on national TV, the premier game, the marquee matchup of the college football weekend, completely and utterly dismantled in the second half by Florida State.
Well said.
So we don't normally venture off the Saints on this podcast, but we're going to do it here because it's impossible to ignore on this Monday.
We did have
this Labor
football
Day.
on a Sunday.
We did have football on a Sunday. We're going to talk about it this Monday rewind that we do, and we're going to get a little bit of Tulane after this as well.
Yeah.
But I'll be somewhat succinct here with LSU because I am a Saints guy. I cover the Saints, whatever. But they told me tomorrow, hey, we need you to switch beats. You got to cover LSU. I would do it in a heartbeat because that's how much I love college football, and that's how much, obviously, I'm an LSU guy. It's neither here nor there, but doesn't matter. But anyway, let's go forward. Okay, so we knew the secondary was going to be bad.
Yeah.
We knew it. We just knew it.
It was the topic of Fox 8 Overtime for
We
weeks.
knew it. It's been the hole on the team. Everyone knew it. We knew there was a chance Harold Perkins, at least in the first game in a new position, was going to be somewhat weird. It was. Not shocking. We knew not having Mason Smith up front was going to be an issue. I didn't think it was the reason they lost the game, but I do think it would have made a difference. Regardless, you didn't have him. None of that surprised me. All that to say, defensively did not surprise me. Surrendering 45 points, yes, it's a little much, but that didn't surprise me. The lack of... What surprised me were two things. One, a coaching staff that lived off second half adjustments last year, had none. They were completely out-coached in the second half.
They looked worse off in the second half.
It's like they didn't know what hit them. It's like all of a sudden it just felt like they were on autopilot. It's like I felt like early in the game, both teams, it was a little too much adrenaline. It was almost like they were a little too amped up, both teams. And it took them a while to settle in. But, they missed the 2 fourth-down calls. And in the second half, the coaching adjustment was just non-existent. Meanwhile, Florida State figured something out because they were running it right at you. They were completing every pass. I think they scored on every single drive in the second half, plus the drive to close out the first half. So that's number one. And BK, Brian Kelly, said as much, how much it was a complete coaching disaster. Number two, and this is thoroughly disappointing. Thoroughly disappointing. I tweeted about it last night. The stunning lack of offensive evolution was so disappointing to me. I was so ready to see where this offense had evolved into from last year, laying the foundation, to this year building off of it. It looked the exact same. A triple option offense with short throws to the sideline and Jaden Daniels running. Still no running back has emerged. Offensive line, all return, and they can't move anybody. Jaden Daniels, whether it's play calling or not, the middle of the field doesn't exist. You can draw a line from one line down the seam on either side, straight from the line of scrimmage all the way to the goal line, and you can just take an eraser. You just scratch it out. They're not using that part of the field.
Not at all.
They're not using it. Now imagine, if you will, for a second, some of the plays Florida State was making and Jordan Travis, where he was living, middle of the field. That's where big plays happen. They don't use it. So the lack of evolution within the offense is concerning, because the formula for success this year, you're going to have to rely on your offense to be a little more explosive, a little more firepower, because you have significant deficiencies on defense, and you have a guy, your best player, you have him changing positions. We'll see how long that lasts. We'll see how long that lasts with Harold Perkins. So you need your offense to be better. And who knows what could have happened had they scored on that 4th and goal, had they scored on that 4th, or got the first down on that 4th and 1. But it didn't happen.
Nope.
He didn't execute.
We play what if all day, but when at the end of the day, you got outplayed. Florida State scored 31 straight points. I mean, there's nothing you can look at here and be like, you know what, that was good.
And LSU got all the breaks with the officials. LSU got all the breaks with the officials.
Yeah.
Every single one of the breaks, the close calls, they all went in LSU's favor.
The late hit on Mason Taylor out of bounds.
The late hit on Mason Taylor. The over aggressive. They stopped Jaden Daniels and they kind of kept the momentum going forward, and he fell down. They should have kept their flag in the pocket there, but didn't happen. The 4th and goal, don't mind the aggression. What I did mind was you got up to the line, you were about to call 4th down play. You didn't like the look you got. You had to call the timeout, so you had to change your play. At that point, if you had to call your timeout, go for the 3 at that point. Yep. Go for the 3 at that point. And then they ran the other 4th down. They ran the triple option. They got blew up. The right guard got blew up, and it completely wrecked the timing of the whole play. And then Florida State crowded the line of scrimmage with more guys than they can block, and it was just a disaster. So, humble pie. They need to eat it. They have to eat. They have to. The good news. The silver lining. As bad as it looked in the secondary, they have no choice but to get better. And they will get somewhat better.
It's hard to get worse.
Hard to get worse, but they're going to get, like, the game against Ole Miss worries me because Lane Kiffin can draw up plays and completely out-scheme people. But they can get better. I think the offensive line can get a little bit better because I don't think they're going to face a front like that for a while. And the schedule, for the most part, they should be able to get on a run here with some teams they can beat. Mississippi State's not going to be a pushover team because they hung with LSU for the first half last year. But them losing to Florida State, there's nothing wrong with that. Them losing the way they did was totally inexcusable and thoroughly disappointing. Them losing to the 8th-ranked team in the country was totally – that's why it was only a 2-point favorite, was fine. Like that could have happened. No one was surprised by that.
It wasn't that they lost. It was the way they lost.
Right. No one was surprised by that. That they were if you looked at their schedule, I said before the season, there's 3 teams that could beat LSU: Florida State, Ole Miss, and Alabama. Florida State beat them, but they handled them, and they beat them at the line of scrimmage, and they beat them up, and they out-coached, outclassed, and just thoroughly beat them down in Orlando. So LSU's got to go back to the drawing board here, and I wouldn't be shocked if I see a few personnel tweaks, especially at wide receiver, maybe at DB. Getting Mason Smith back will certainly help. But I'm very curious to see how they respond to this, because that was just no bueno for LSU.
I was drinking the Kool-Aid prior to this game too, because I really thought, I had a conversation with some other folks. Jaden Daniels is better than Jordan Travis, and I was like, yeah, no, I'll bite on that. But no, like last night, it definitely looked flip-flop there.
The thing with Jaden is, I think you know exactly who he is, what he can and cannot do, and as a coaching staff, that's good, because you know what to call, when to call, where to call. But at some point, now you have 4 years in a game tape. You've now started for 4 years in one game. So now everybody can study you for the last year, and I think that's going to be something they have to watch going forward. So I'm not ready to pull the plug on Jaden Daniels yet. No. I am disappointed in the lack of offensive evolution, because that offense is not good enough. That's an 8-4 offense right now. They've got to figure out a way to get better. And
one last thing before we move on to head uptown a little bit, but Brian Kelly did say, he said, this is not the football team I thought we were.
I loved it.
Powerful.
I loved it. I loved it, because that needs to be heard.
Yeah.
That needs to be said. That needs to be verbalized. Brian Kelly early in the offseason made a very interesting comments in an interview with ESPN or SI, one of them, where he said, we're a year away from a national championship. That was his way then of tempering things, because the roster overhaul is still not where it needs to be. And you could say, and this is part of the give and take with the transfer portal, you take a lot of transfers in. Sometimes they hit, Joe Burrow. Sometimes they do not. And I don't know, right now, the ones they got in, especially in that secondary,
it's not hitting.
They are not hitting right now. So we'll see. We'll revisit this midseason, see if they've gotten any better. I think the schedule will help them out a little bit. But backs firmly against the wall. Any national title aspirations now? Get it out of your head, because you can't think about that if you're LSU, because you got to grind one game at a time. But big picture, you got to run the table now. You have to run the table to even have a chance at getting into the college football playoff or national title. And I hate even verbalizing that right now after what I saw last night, because they look nothing close to a college football playoff team. But they will regroup. We know that they will. They're going to have better days. We know that. But it still stings right now, man. It really stings right now, and we'll see how LSU responds.
All right, so like I said, let's head uptown. We're going to talk about some Tulane Green Wave football. How did you feel about that win against South Alabama? I mean, that's a pretty convincing win. It's not necessarily the highest level of competition, but we got to see some good things from Michael Pratt.
But people talked a lot about South Alabama, how they were a sneaky good opponent, feisty team. Tulane, very high last year, a very good season. Win the Cotton Bowl against USC.
Yeah.
Lose their best offensive player, lose their best 2 defensive players.
We'll see that one offensive player.
But they returned their quarterback. They had to what? They had to evolve. Now, they were forced to.
Yeah.
Because there's no one replacing Tajay Spears. And they put the ball in Michael Pratt's hands. And look what he did. 14 of 15. Let me tell you something about Michael Pratt. He is going to get on the radar with scouts.
Is he the best quarterback in the state?
Maybe. He may be. Now, I hate doing that opponent-wise, system-wise.
Yeah.
If you put him with LSU, how would they do? Y'all can have fun with that out there, whatever you say. But I'll just say I was thoroughly impressed with Michael Pratt, because I always viewed him as a little bit of a kind of a rugged game winner, all he does is win type guy.
Yeah.
He's always got his elbows are always scuffed up. He's not the great. His passing wise before this year, he was gritty.
Yeah. He's a max
but
effort
he
guy.
looked like a polished college football quarterback that's played a lot of football and has learned and evolved each step of the way. Now, we'll see a week 7 or 8 if it's the same way. But I thought he was fantastic Saturday night. Now, I will say this, Michael Pratt, if you're listening, dude, stop taking stupid hits. Stop taking dumb hits. That one play you almost got hurt on was a totally unnecessary hit. Don't do it anymore. Your team was relying on you. So there was a play where you saw where he just got caught. It was what a play. Just eat it, man. Just throw the ball away. Just get y'all up. There was no reason to take that shot. So be a little smarter there. Jaden as well. He took some shots as well.
Ooh, the one where he jumped into the line there.
thought he was decapitated at first.
Good
He got
Lord.
hit so hard. So, good vibes, Tulane. And look, who knows how the rankings are going to shake out? Are they going to be ranked ahead of LSU in the next rankings? Set of rankings? It's going to be a lot closer than people think.
Does Tulane handle business with Ole Miss?
That's going to be a great game.
That's going to be a
fantastic game. I don't know. I'm not ready to call it yet. So that's going to be a great game. But if you're LSU, you better watch that game closely because that's Ole Miss that's coming to. They got to go to. Does they have to go? Yeah, they have to go to Ole Miss. At the end of the month. So, excuse me, a little water there. So yeah, entertaining weekend on both ends of the spectrum. There, I was happy for Tulane, but man, I was upset about my Tigers. So we'll see what happens next week.
All right. Thank you guys so much for listening. You can find us wherever you listen to and watch your podcasts. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, hit that little bell notification button. You get updated whenever we upload a new podcast. For Sean Fazan, I'm Vasilios. This has been the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. We'll catch you guys next time.